Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nate here, and welcome to yet another Fallout 4 investigation. Today, I'd like to tackle two of the weirdest, most perplexing, and convoluted mysteries in the game. Those being the questions of why Deacon was following you after you left Vault 111, and what his true backstory is. These are some of the most talked about topics in the community, and for good reason, because Bethesda clearly crafted an insanely detailed hidden narrative, one that concerns not just Fallout 4, but Fallout 3, and a boatload of cut content that we're going to dive into. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, you may or may not already know this, as it is a bit of an Easter egg, but Deacon, or Deke as I'll sometimes call him, is a character whom we can catch stalking and following us at various moments since the beginning of the game. During our first visit to Diamond City ever, when we're fresh out of the vault, Deacon will be disguised as a security guard and will watch us from a distance. During a mission that sends us to the settlement of Bunker Hill, Deacon will be there, posing as a caravan worker, monitoring our every move. Sometimes he'll hide in the memory chairs when we're at the Good Neighbor Lounge. There are many more examples, and we'll go over them all later, but you get the idea. This feller has definitely been creeping on us. Now, the thing is, as you're probably aware, Deacon is actually the third in command of the Railroad, an underground organization of spies, scientists, and fighters who have committed themselves to freeing sentient synths and robots from the Institute. They're one of the four major factions the player can choose to support in the struggle for the Commonwealth. We'll usually meet them by the end of the game's first act, when we stumble upon their headquarters. If we do elect to side with them, we'll end up learning a lot about their characters, and Deacon, in particular, will become a potential companion, whom we can get really close with. Now, given the fact that we, the sole survivor, turn out to be the leader of the Institute's mom or dad, and prove instrumental in deciding the fate of the world, it honestly makes perfect sense why Deacon or the Railroad would have been keeping tabs on us for as long as possible. What's so strange is that no matter how close we get with Deke, or no matter how far we advance through the ranks of the Railroad, neither he nor they will ever admit to any spying on the player at all. To complicate matters even further, Deacon's backstory seems to feature substantial hints at him knowing some game-changing secrets. But the character was intentionally written to have one of the strangest backstories imaginable that's clearly connected. No matter, he and all his other agents just pretend as though the first time they ever saw you was whenever you ran up to their HQ on your own accord for the first time. Furthermore, when in the story you eventually do find out the big plot twist and realize the 10-year-old son that was kidnapped from you is actually the leader of the Institute, the leader of the Railroad herself, Desdemona, seems more surprised than you are, and genuinely doesn't seem to have had any idea. In fact, before you even tell them who you are, the Railroad's leaders are constantly sending you on ultra high-risk missions and putting you in danger that they wouldn't have dared to have done had they known your true identity. Furthermore, how could they have known about us before we left the vault anyway? Heck, even if they did, we later find out that it was Sean who secretly opened everything up and allowed us to leave, because he wanted to see what would happen. How could they have known when he'd release us? Maybe they weren't spying on us then. Maybe we were just bumping into Deacon while he was working on some other missions. Well, no, because just outside of Vault 111, overlooking the compound on a large hill, is a small outpost that bears a Railroad ally insignia on it. Someone, Deacon or another Railroad affiliate, was here, watching over our vault right around the time it opened. This was no coincidence. Someone knew something. I'll just spoil the premise now. It turns out that Deacon was definitely interested in you for a while. But for reasons we'll explore, he never told anyone else in the faction. And his own backstory is one Bethesda purposely made to be one of the most sophisticated in the game. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be investigating the strange man that is Deacon, and why he was after us all along. We'll start the video by quickly running through all of the instances we can catch Deacon creepin' before we met the Railroad. Then, we'll quickly get caught up to speed on the man and the faction's history, before transitioning into some of the various clues left in the game's story itself, and what we can find in the game files. Then piecing everything together and analyzing the surprising picture we're left with. Thus, without any further ado, let's put on our Nick Valentine trench coats and do further, as we crack the most complicated man in the Commonwealth. Alright, so as promised, let's begin by running through each time we can catch Deacon secretly tailing us in the game. In total, there are 4 moments when this happens. Most are locked to a specific point in the storyline, so let's dive into them in the order of which they should occur. Note, if for whatever reason you opt to join the railroad super early, none of these stalker moments will play out, or they'll stop when you do. The first time Deacon can be discovered sneaking will be during the player's first ever visit to Diamond City. Upon our arrival, the town's gates will be closed, and we'll have to convince an operator to open them up via intercom. Once we've done so, the mayor, Mr. McDonough, will personally greet us, alongside a small group of guards. One of those guards is, again, Deacon in disguise. This early in the game, you likely won't recognize him, but if you do, you can approach the man and attempt to interact. Sadly, he'll just insist he's a real guard and refuse to break character.
Hey, what's up? What a day, huh? Welcome to the, Great Green Jewel. You'll totally love it here. Don't you have, like, important things to do? Nothing more to say.
I'm sure many of you are eager to find out if this version of Deacon is essential or not, and let me just answer your question by saying yes. Yes, he is. As a matter of fact, this version of Deacon is really its own NPC anyway. All of his disguises are. There's like 5 or 6 Deacons in the game files. So even if we did take out the dude while he was spying, it wouldn't change anything, because his story character is still separate. Moving on, the next time you're likely to intercept Deacon is during the quest Dangerous Minds, when the player and Nick Valentine take a trip to the Good Neighbor Memory Den and attempt to live through the memories of this guy named Kellogg you murdered to death earlier. During this mission, Deacon will be lounging in one of the memory chairs, clear as day, though he won't respond to any interaction. Our third tango is Good Neighbor based again. After the sole survivor has completed the quest, The Big Dig, Deacon will be dressed as just another drifter, and will join the crowd that forms to listen to the mayor's speech. Note, The Big Dig is a side quest, so theoretically this could play out even if you haven't touched the main storyline. And finally, at any moment in the game before the player has met the railroad, if you journey to Bunker Hill, there's a roughly 5 to 10% chance Deacon will spawn in, dressed as a caravan worker, just keeping his distance. If approached, his dialogue will be kind of funny.
Excuse me. What's up? What a day, huh? Sure love trading here. For trade stuff. Don't you have, like, important things to do?
This is the last time we can definitely catch Deacon sneaking, but the evidence of early railroad espionage doesn't end here. As I stated in the video's introduction, just outside of Vault 111, overlooking the place from a southern hill, we can find a small lookout post with a railroad ally rail sign painted onto it. If you ever join the faction, you'll find out that the railroad uses a variety of complex signs, called rail signs, to communicate with agents across the Commonwealth. This one means whoever was here must have been an agent, probably Deacon, or at the very least, someone working on the railroad's behalf. So they've been watching over our vault since before we even left it. Fun fact, Deacon is actually the guy who teaches you about rail signs too. I digress. This may not have been their only lookout post either, because just north of the Red Rocket truck stop, there's another similar setup, where the sole survivor can find a small camp on a hill overlooking the gas station. This is quite significant, because the Red Rocket stop is one of the first places we'll visit, and it's where dog meat can be obtained for the first time. Someone was watching over this place too. That said, while it's totally possible Deacon or another railroad agent could have built this outpost, there aren't any ally rail signs close by like there were on the last one. So for all we know, a different group or person made this. though I'm not sure if that makes me feel any better. Regardless, this outpost is the last piece of tangible potential evidence we have. Deacon does turn out to be a huge fan of stealth boys and turning himself invisible, so it's very likely he was stalking us at other points as well, but this is all the stuff we can confirm. Okie dokie, that about does it for all of the examples there are of Deacon sneakin'. Let's finally do some history, and talk about who this man is and how his organization began. In order to begin getting the best understanding of the Railroad, it's first important to understand their chief adversary, the Institute. Legend has it that hundreds of years ago, back on that fateful day in October of 2077, when the bombs first started following, some scientists and staff members at the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, one of the most prestigious universities in the world back then, fled to a small underground bunker, and they were able to survive the initial blasts. These lucky few survivors and their descendants would choose to remain underground even when the rads cleared, and over time they slowly expanded the bunker and turned it into one of the most advanced complexes in the world. Maybe the most advanced. Fast forward to the present day, 2287, and Institute scientists are still down here, making innovative discoveries and living a lavish lifestyle in isolation. The problem with these people, or at least the problem the Railroad has, is that the Institute has been developing advanced human-esque androids called Synths since the Great War. Throughout most of the Institute's history, while the synths they were producing were very impressive, they weren't quite human-like. However, that all changed 60 years ago, when the Institute raided Vault 111 and found our son, Sean. They used his untampered pre-war DNA to make a breakthrough that allowed them to create the Generation 3 synth, which is so sophisticated, it's almost indistinguishable from an actual person. Members of the Railroad believe these Gen 3 synths are sentient living people and deserve the same rights as any normal human. Thus, they oppose the Institute for manufacturing them and forcing them to do their bidding. The earliest records we have confirming the existence of the Railroad date back to the year 2266, roughly 21 years prior to the events of Fallout 4. The Railroad is likely much older than this, but it's said that in 2266, the Institute discovered their old headquarters and destroyed everything, almost completely wiping out the entire underground organization. However, there were two survivors, a man named Johnny D, and a more experienced agent calling himself Wyatt, and they went on to restart from scratch. As you know, they specialize in rescuing synths that wish to be freed on an individual basis. They are somehow tipped off to a droid that wants out and extract them before wiping their memories and helping them build new lives as real people. Usually, the Railroad tries to make sure that these synths are starting new lives outside of the Commonwealth, and their favorite place to take them is the Capital Wasteland. As you might imagine, the Institute doesn't appreciate their property being stolen, and in response they've waged an incredible war against these vigilantes. They've created an entire division that they call the Synth Retention Bureau, whose job is to reclaim escaped synths and hunt down Railroad agents. The Bureau has been doing a mighty fine job too. Allegedly over the years, they've repeatedly tracked down Railroad HQs and sent droids in to massacre their leadership. We'll talk more about these SRB raids soon, though as recently as 6 years ago, they found the Railroad's base of operations and almost wiped out the guild entirely. It was only through the quick thinking of one member, Deacon, that a few agents survived and relocated to the Old North Church. And thus, here we are. By the present day, the start of Fallout 4, the RR remains a force to be reckoned with, and what's left of the group has learned the hard way that ultra-strict secrecy is necessary to survive. Should the sole survivor elect to join them, he or she will not only help the Railroad rebuild, but you'll play a critical role in leading them to destroy the Institute once and for all. Okay, now that that history lesson's done, we can start breaking down their specific story and Deacon's involvement for hints on why they were spying on us. We'll first get the chance to formally meet with the Railroad during a quest called The Road to Freedom, which sends us to locate the Guild's headquarters. This mission can be obtained through a variety of ways. We can hear a Railroad broadcast where an announcer states they're looking for new recruits and dares any interested to find out where they're based. Or it's possible that a different faction can give us the mission and demand that we find out where the railroad is hiding so they can attack. However you obtain this quest, you'll eventually discover that the group is based beneath the Old North Church in some catacombs. And after solving a riddle to open up their main compound's door, you'll be greeted by a woman named Desdemona, who will introduce herself as the railroad's leader, and some of their agents staring us down with Gatling weapons, demanding to know who we are and how we found them.
Stop right there. You went through a lot of effort to arrange this meeting. But before we go any further, answer my questions. Who the hell are you?
This, right off the bat, should come off as a bit weird, because the railroad should by now know exactly who we are. They've been stalking us since we left the vault. Alas, as we're being interrogated, none other than Deacon will enter the room, and he'll vouch for the player. Depending on what quests you've completed at this point in the game, he'll list some of your achievements, like killing Kellogg or clearing a certain dungeon of mutants. Deacon will promise everyone that you're cool and shouldn't be treated as a threat, claiming to have a quote-unquote good feeling, and ultimately, everyone will comply.
Deacon, where have you been?
You're having a party. What gives with my invitation?
I need intel. Who is this?
Well, he's got to be someone. He made it down here, right? Normal people just don't do that.
Stop, you're making me blush.
Hey, just calling it like I see it.
So you got nothing. He's a complete unknown.
What are our options? Shoot him? Come on. We need friends, Des. Now, more than ever. And I got a real good feeling about him.
What? Are you vouching for him?
Yes. Definitely.
Fine. That changes things.
This interaction seems to indicate that Deacon himself is very familiar with us, but no one else in the railroad is. Like, he's been spying on us on his own time and not reporting to his superiors. Whatever the case, after a bit more chatter and a lot of convincing, Desdemona will reluctantly agree to allow you to become a railroad tourist if you're willing. Tourists aren't actual railroad members or agents. They're merely helpers that occasionally perform odd jobs here and there for the guild. Des says that maybe after a few years of being a tourist, she'll consider promoting us to the real enterprise. Because Deacon vouched for you, she tells you to just talk to him if you want more info, and we'll leave the two of us alone. Alright, pause again right here. I know I keep saying it, but this introduction clearly shows that Deacon was the only person in the faction who knew anything about you at all. So perhaps it wasn't the whole railroad spying, but just him acting alone with his own plans. Also, spoiler alert, the first few missions she sends you on are really dangerous ones, and there's no way she would have recklessly risked your life in that fashion if she had any idea of how valuable you were. It seems safe to say that Deacon was acting on his own initiative to get you involved with the railroad. But why? What did he see in us, and how did he know of our potential? Well, as soon as Des leaves the room, we can ask him. He'll initially lie and state that he only backed you because the guild needs new members. They're low on manpower. But if your speech skill is up to the task, you can pass a couple of speech checks that force him to admit more.
So tell me, why did you vouch for me?
In our little outfit, it's my job to know things. And with everything you've done, it's clear you're capable. A dangerous enemy. And I'm betting a valuable ally.
But why the trust? You can't be taking it all on faith.
I don't know if we can trust you, but I hope we can. We just survived a hell of a crisis, so we may just be a teeny-weeny bit desperate for new members. If everything was sunshine and bottle caps, we'd probably play a longer getting-to-know-you game, but we don't have that luxury.
Really? Is that all?
You just don't give up. All right, I have a short list of people I think would be a good fit for our family. You piqued my interest, so maybe I asked around. Did my homework. If you hadn't found us, there's a chance I would have found you instead. Thanks for saving me the trip.
Aha, this is our answer. Deacon had us on a list of good potential new recruits, and that's why he'd been keeping tabs on us and was so excited to invite the player in. Except, No, this is probably a lie too. Or at least it's not the whole truth. This gentleman had been watching us since we left the vault, before we even did anything noteworthy. How did he know we were in 111? And how could he have determined we'd be such a good fit early on? And why didn't he tell anyone else? Yeah, there's definitely something he's hiding. Deception aside, after we finished thoroughly interrogating him here, Mr. Pants on Fire will explain that just because he has such a good feeling about you, he wants to fast track the player through the tourist phase and make you a real agent ASAP. None of that waiting a year stuff. So, he'll tell you to join him on a really important op, to break back in to an old railroad HQ and recover some items they left behind. Long story short, if we agree, during this mission, he'll teach us a whole lot about the railroad's values and explain what rail signs are, then we'll storm the old HQ, get the item, and meet back up with him at the Old North Church. By the time we've returned, Deacon will have already told Desdemona of our great victory, and successfully convinced her to let you become an actual agent. Congratulations! Now you're allowed in the HQ, and Deacon becomes available as a true companion whenever you need him. And this is where things begin to pick up again. Because we can start to talk with our new railroad colleagues and ask them about Deacon. They'll tell us nobody knows anything about him. Desdemona says that he's the only person who's been with the faction longer than her, and when she first joined sometime more than 10 years ago, Deacon was already a high-ranking, well-trained member. Huh. Tinker Tom, the railroad science guy, has a diary entry on his terminal, where he speculates that maybe Deke is a time traveler or something like that. Humorously, Deacon appears to have found this diary and wrote, quote, "If I were a time traveler, would I let a timeline exist where you knew I knew?" Smiley face. Great. So now not only do we know Deacon was spying on us all along and didn't tell anybody about it, but he's also apparently a man with a mysterious past. Oh gee, I hope these two facts aren't connected. Surprisingly enough, Deacon doesn't see a whole lot of character development throughout the remainder of the story. Or not until the very end he doesn't. So we can skip going over that for now. But he does absolutely reveal a lot of new information as a companion. Deacon is probably tied for being my favorite follower right alongside Nick Valentine. His sarcastic, dry sense of humor is great, and the insistence the dude has on making jokes all of the time is lovely. Anywho, one of the first things you might notice is that while you're wandering the wastes with Deacon, whenever you enter a settlement, he'll frequently pull random NPCs to the side and enter cryptic conversations about railroad-related topics.
Geiger counter, bud?
Mine's in the shop.
You the guy about the article?
The one and only.
I'd be careful around here. The target keeps late hours with strange visitors.
That's not proof.
Hey, not even Piper's dug up anything more yet.
Got it. Keep your head down and no heroics.
Even if we don't understand everything perfectly, we get a first-hand opportunity to watch as Deacon interacts with the railroad's large network of informants and tourists. Hilariously, the owner of Diamond City's Dugout Inn will refer to Deacon as a guard and ask why he's not in his uniform, calling back to the time we saw him disguised as one. Also, notice how many characters call Deacon John Doe or John D.
Ah, the mysterious John Doe. Last time I see you, you were in uniform. But, strangely, the other guards don't know anything about you.
I work the midnight shift, you know? Barely even see the other shifts.
It is almost like you are not a guard at all. Crazy, I know, but also curious.
You know what they say about curiosity. See you around.
Maybe.
Good to see returning customers.
The papers tell
Most
the
die.
Where are you gonna
You
go,
let me
huh?
know if you
Make
need
your
a
way in the
drink.
Commonwealth?
Just act natural. Yada yada Geiger counter. It's me, Mr. Doe.
Mr. Doe. New face, got it. The lady we talked about, she checks out. Not sure about number 3, though. That's all I got.
John Doe, or John D, appears to be an alias Deacon uses when interacting with his informants. Is he related to that Johnny D character who helped rebuild the organization 21 years ago? Well, we'll get there. Just hang on. Anywho, like any other companion, Deacon's opinion of the player will change based on your actions. For the most part, he's a stereotypical good guy. He likes it when you save lives, do the right thing, and really likes it when you help synths, which makes him a bit less suspicious. After you've improved his feelings toward you enough, he'll ask to have a heart-to-heart, so he can tell you something no one else in the world knows. He's a synth. Yep, he was one of the first Gen 3 synths ever rescued by the Railroad ages ago, and afterwards he decided to join to continue helping his brothers.
Well, I guess I'm a little lucky then.
What's done is done, and the upshot is you're in a position where you can act openly. If you go to ground, there's little the coursers can do about it. It doesn't matter much to me. I'm a synth. At least that's what they tell me. So I really don't have anything to lose. For Glory and me and the others, it's easier to dedicate ourselves to the cause.
You're a synth? Why didn't you tell me before?
I don't like talking about it. I was one of the first synths they did the whole cranium reboot on, so it was a bit of a botched job. Most synths have fun fake memories, a happy home, a family. Me, I got nothing. And that, well, it does something to you. Since we're traveling together, I want you to take this. It's my recall code. If you ever need to know something about the Institute, read it to me.
Wow, what a cool story. Maybe that explains how he knew about Vault 1, except he's lying. All you need to do is pass a speech check to call him out, and Mr. Synthman will admit that he made the whole tale up.
I got nothing. And that, well, it does something to you. Since we're traveling together, I want you to take this. It's my recall code. If you ever need to know something about the Institute, read it to me.
If you expect me to believe you, I want proof.
All right, you got me. No fooling you, huh? Don't take it personally. I lie to everyone. Maybe I'm just another human that has people back home he wants to protect. Then again, maybe not.
I don't like being lied to.
My relationship with the truth rubs some people the wrong way. But believe this one thing. I'm in your corner. Always have been. Not everyone can say that. That code I gave you is a hard truth. You can't trust everyone. Even if someone sounds sincere, they could be a synth replacement working for the Institute. The bitch of the problem is recognizing the 90% of the time someone's on the up and up and the 10% of the time you're being played.
You've lied to me at least once. This is just more of the same.
Yeah, you got me. But you're gonna hear the same sort of lies elsewhere. There's other organizations out there, and in time, I'm sure they're going to spoon-feed you their own patented form of bullshit. Ignore the verbiage and look at what they're doing, what they're asking you to do, what sort of world they'd have you build, and how they're going to pay for it.
I don't need any more of your lies.
Then boy, did you choose the wrong traveling companion. But hey, listen. And at the end of the day, you'll need to make a choice. Make it the right one.
This lying problem isn't just shown in Deacon's direct affinity conversations with us. Even when we're just wandering the wastes together, he'll frequently make absurd, ridiculous claims that sound way too unbelievable to be true, and can often be outright disproven by our existing knowledge of the lore.
I used to run a steam cleaner store before the bombs fell, so I see this and I think dollar signs. I grew up in a vault. I was a morale officer. How am I doing, boss? I sailed the ocean for a few months, made it to Greenland. Crazy story, I'll tell you about it later. Did I have you going about being a synth? You'd be amazed how many people actually fall for that. I was a soldier once, way back west. I'll tell you about it someday.
Those were just a small handful of some of the more memorable things I heard him say in a short hour-long play session of recording. He literally has hundreds of more equally absurd claims he can say at any moment in the game. And every time you level his affinity up, Deacon will ask the player if he can tell you a new story. This time he promises to be honest and real and that he finally trusts you. And of course, you can debunk these special stories with a simple speech check.
You founded the railroad?
Sure, me and Johnny D and Watts. Hell, that was over 60, 70 years ago. After a while, you lose count. I tell everyone I get the occasional face change to stay anonymous. Truth is, it takes a lot of work to keep this mug handsome.
He might randomly just start talking about the time he visited the Capital Wasteland, and proceed to demonstrate knowledge of it he couldn't have gotten without a visit. He knows about Project Purity, about President Eden, Elder Lyons. He's probably telling the truth about that.
I ever tell you about the time I was in Capital Wasteland? Now there's a tale. I miss Capital Wasteland. You can actually drink the water there. Capital Wasteland. Exports, purified water, some decent tech. Oh, and an insane suicidal cult that worships radiation. Thanks, guys. Back in Capital Wasteland, the Brotherhood was a force to be reckoned with. But them plus a giant airship. I'm convincing the next raw recruit that I'm actually President Eden. Think I can pull it off?
The fact that he sometimes is telling the truth, but usually isn't, makes understanding Deacon very challenging. And what his real backstory is probably among the most debated mysteries in the Fallout 4 community. Some say he actually is a synth. Some say he actually is a Vault Dweller. Some say he's the player character from Fallout 3. I, however, subscribe to a different theory, and it's one I think I can prove. Once the sole survivor has maxed out Deacon's positive relationship bar and reached his maximum affinity level, he will ask to have one last talk with you. In this dialogue, he'll apologize for being so dishonest in the past, and express how much he appreciates you putting up with it. And, well, I'll just let him do the talking.
I'm a liar. Everyone knows it. I make no secret of it. Because the truth is, I'm a fraud. To my core. When I was young, a hell of a long time ago, I was, well, scum. I was a bigot. A very violent bigot.
Were you really that bad?
Worse than that. I ran with a gang in University Point. We called ourselves the UP Deathclaws. For kicks, we'd terrorize anyone we thought was a synth. We kept egging each other on. Started with some property damage, graduated to some beatdowns. Then, inevitably, a lynching. The Claw's leader was convinced we'd finally found and killed the synth. Looking back, I'm not so sure.
You killed someone.
That one was enough for me. It was his eyes. Those eyes haunt me. It's bulging. So I turned my back on my brothers, broke all contact. Time passed, I became a farmer, if you can believe that. Then, one day I found someone. She saw something in me I didn't know was there. Barbara, well, she just was.
What was she like?
She had a smile like on those old magazine covers. Her eyes. We were trying for kids, eking out a living. Then one day, turns out my Barbara, she was a synth. She didn't know that. I certainly didn't. I don't know how the Deathclaws found out, but there was blood.
So they killed her?
Yes. I don't remember much clearly after that. I know I killed most of the Claws. I must have made a big impression. The railroad contacted me, figuring I'd be sympathetic, seeing that I lost my wife. And, well, what I did afterwards.
The railroad let you in, even though you were in the Deathclaws.
So many years had passed, I don't think anyone, well, except for the Claws, knew that. All they knew is someone fought back. I don't even know why I lie anymore. But I can't tell the truth. Everyone, Tom, Dez, you, even Barrington, they deserve to be on the railroad. I don't. I'm everything wrong with Commonwealth. You're the only friend I got. I don't deserve you being okay with this. Hell, I'm not even asking for it. But I Figured you should know.
Everyone's got a past. The important thing is you're trying to make up for it. I'm still on your side.
I'm not the hugging type, so yeah. Good talk.
So now he says that he used to be a part of an anti-synth gang, but left to become a farmer instead after the boys got too extreme. He then ended up falling in love with a synth named Barbara, and the two settled down and almost had their happily ever after. But somehow, the old gang found out about his robotic love and killed her. The railroad then contacted him, offering a chance to join, and that is how he got his start. This very well could be another one of Deacon's lies. However, I think we can prove it isn't. For one, this story is only told after getting Deacon to his final affinity level, and it's the last one he'll tell. Furthermore, this is the only one of Deacon's affinity stories that we can't get him to admit was a lie via speech check. It's the only one that can't be disproven. Bethesda meant something by that. What's even more damning is that very rarely, some of Deacon's more mundane travel dialogue will appear to allude to Barbara and his trouble with the claws.
Can you ever truly escape your past? God,
Hey there.
I hope so. She would have liked this.
A lot of his travel quotes are just made up fibs, but these come off as a bit more emotional. Furthermore, during the quest, Rocket's Red Glare, Deacon, Tinker Tom, and the sole survivor will take control of a vertibird to use against the Brotherhood of Steel. And there's this moment where he refers to himself as an ex-farmer, like he said he used to be.
The Brotherhood is nothing if not arrogant. They'd never dream in a million years that an ex-farmer and a scaver could fly one of their birds.
Finally, if all of that evidence wasn't enough, here's the smoking gun. In Fallout 4's game files, there's an unused texture for a wooden wall with the name Barbara scratched onto it. Bethesda's ID for this texture is Railroad Barbara Grave 01. She was real after all, and this likely would have been scratched in by Deacon on a wooden grave post. In fairness, since this grave was left unused, we can't say Bethesda's 100% confirmed anything. But why would they have made something like this if this wasn't what they were thinking? And it fits in with all of our other evidence nicely. Many of Fallout 4's companions have personal quests we can unlock by maxing out our relationship with them. Nick Valentine will ask us to help him solve a great case that's older than the Great War. McCready will reveal to the player that he has a sick son back in the Capital Wasteland, and request our help in finding a cure. Deacon, though, has no personal quest. I suspect Bethesda was originally planning to give him one, wherein we would visit Barbara's grave, but for whatever reason, cancelled it. Now, you can see in this texture, Barbara's last name has been scratched out. Her last name was probably Deacon's last name too, considering they were married. So he probably did that to keep his identity a secret. Take what I'm about to show you with a grain of salt, because we're getting into conspiracy theory territory here. But in 2018, a mod author by the name of VoltGirl2077 noticed that when the detail on this image is greatly upscaled, and some alterations are made to the color and lighting, it becomes easier to discern meaningless scribbles from the real shapes. Most of this last name is still unreadable, but it does clearly start with the letter D. This brings us back to that question, is Deacon Johnny D, one of the original two refounders of the railroad from 21 years ago? Because he's the oldest surviving member of the faction, nobody has any idea when exactly Deacon joined. I already mentioned that Desdemona is the second oldest member, and by the time she signed up, Deacon was already an experienced agent. Well, in the Railroad HQ, on the PAM mainframe terminal, there's a file titled Access Records. This file is locked until the player has completed the game with the Railroad and defeated the Institute, at which point it unlocks, but you're not notified. What this document turns out to be is a collection of records from the three people who have led the Railroad since it was refounded by Wyatt and Johnny D. The first leader was Wyatt, the dude Johnny D refounded it with. The second was a man named Pinky Thompson, and the third is Desdemona, who's still in charge. I'm just going to go ahead and read you a handful of the earliest entries in this file, starting with the first one there is, and tell me if you notice anything. Okay, first one, written by Wyatt, November 2266, the day he refounded the railroad. Quote, gathered surviving runners, held an election. I lost, or won, depending on how you look at it. After the HQ massacre, most people simply left the railroad. Only one person survived HQ, a runner named John D. He called out for volunteers to get some of the old files. No one stepped forward. My job is to rebuild the railroad from scratch. I think where Agamemnon went wrong is that HQ is known by too many people. I'm theorizing here, but once the Institute hit a safe house and leaned on anyone, the HQ would be easy to find. But how could Agamemnon know just how deadly those damn coursers would be? How the hell do we rebuild from here? End quote. Okay, next entry. February 2267. Got our first synth out of the Commonwealth last month. Threw one hell of a party. What people don't know is another runaway was recaptured by the coursers before we even got to them. John D has been finding tourists at a pretty good clip, but he keeps their identities to himself. Operational security, he calls it. It makes me grind my teeth, but he's probably right. Our whole organization needs to be more like a pyramid. A broad base of tourists that help out, mainly with information. Then the runners and safe house owners in the middle, then agents. HQ on top of that. End quote. Ah, okay. Just like Deacon, John D did a lot of work with tourists and information gathering. And he kept the majority of information he got to himself to keep the operation as secure as possible. Remember how Deacon didn't tell anyone else in the railroad about us? Alright, next entry. March 2273. Wyatt writes, quote, a whole work crew of synths escaped together. 5 synths at once. We're scrambling to keep them hidden. Coursers have been spotted looking for them. They found one of our safe houses. John developed a dead drop system we've been using. Some vocal elements, Toby, say we should shut down, but that's a year and a half worth of synths. End quote. Now, this entry right here from March of 2273 is the last time John D's name is ever mentioned in railroad history for sure. It is our last confirmation of his existence. And he does not pop up in this Access Records file again from here on out. But here's what the next entry on this file reads. It is actually written by a different leader. Turns out Wyatt was killed shortly after, and a new guy named Pinky is in charge. Here's what he says. Quote, December 2273. I just found Wyatt's journal. For whoever runs this outfit in the future, I figure you should know how we messed up. We were running the work group of 5 out of the Commonwealth when the coursers found our HQ. Total storm. Deacon, that's what he's calling himself now, had an escape route planned, and most of the survivors owe him their life. Wyatt didn't make it past the first hail of bullets. End quote. Oof, let's unpack this. So this entry, December 2273, is the first time, or I should say, the earliest time ever we know Deacon's name is confirmed to appear in railroad history. He's at least been in the faction for 14 years. His name doesn't show up before this. Funnily enough, it just so happens that the name Deacon starts showing up after the name Johnny D stops being used. Furthermore, Pinky says that Deacon is quote-unquote what somebody's calling themselves now, as in they changed the name from something. Yeah, it seems very obvious that what really happened is Johnny D changed his name and identity to Deacon. Given what we know about Barbara, we can start to really piece together a bit of a history. Sometime before the year 2266, the man we today know as Deacon was in love with a woman named Barbara, who was killed by a group of anti-synth bigots that apparently Deacon used to roll with. After which he joined the railroad under the alias Johnny D, and a few years later the faction was attacked, and he and another more senior agent named Wyatt were the only survivors, and together they rebuilt. There we go. He's not a synth or a vault dweller or anything. No, he has a definable past. It's just very, very difficult to discern. Although, even with this vague backstory, we still haven't answered one of the original questions. How did Deacon know about Vault 111? Well, thankfully, if we jump a few years ahead in these access record files, we can find Desdemona's own personal entries, and she has some documents from a few years ago that give us a lot of hints. Sometime in the year 2284, she wrote, quote, "Pam's been trying to find the location of the Institute in earnest. Failing. Deacon's convinced the solution lies in the past, not future." Deacon already knows the big secret. We know nothing about the railroad before Wyatt was in charge. Or is Deacon Johnny D? Question mark. Deacon's been digging into Institute signings from years, even decades before. Or at least, that's what he says. Getting really tired of all of his lies. End quote. Oh wow. So right here, Desdemona even kind of confirms our whole Deacon Johnny D theory. But beyond that, she mentioned that Deacon believed the best way to find the location of the Institute and figure out where they're based was by looking into the past, and he began digging through Institute sightings from years and decades before. Desdemona also mentions Deacon knowing something called the Big Secret, and that might sound really ominous, but it's actually not. The Railroad's Big Secret is that they sort of have a man inside the Institute working with them. Now, for a second you might think, wait a minute, Nate, the Railroad had an inside guy? That's how Deacon could have found out about Sean and Vault 111 and everything. But no. You see, the Railroad's quote-unquote inside guy is an Institute scientist named Liam Benet. Liam is very sympathetic to the synths and feels horrible for them. So occasionally, what he does is help synths that want out get teleported above the Institute by forging work orders for them. The problem is Liam doesn't realize he's helping the Railroad. Heck, he doesn't even know what the organization is or is even aware of their existence. All he thinks he's doing is just teleporting some synths above ground to be nice. He sympathizes with them, but he's not really working with the RR, and they're definitely not communicating on any consistent basis. So there's no way he told them about Vault 111 and Sean. But I digress. Let's get back to Dez's terminal entries and see if we can find anything else about Deacon. In the year 2286, just 1 year prior to the start of Fallout 4, she wrote, quote, "Dry year. Coursers, work crews, and synths vanished for 3 months. No idea why. Worked on fortifying switchboard. Deacon was barely here all year. Chasing ghosts." Ah, so Deacon spent most of the last year away from the Railroad itself, out on his own mission, quote-unquote, chasing ghosts and looking through the past. I wonder. Finally, the last record on this entire database was written by Desdemona sometime in 2287, the same year we escaped. Quote, "Deacon working on secret project. Codename Wanderer. Deacon has a wild theory and an even wilder plan. Tea party. I agree, there's something strange there, but I'm withholding judgment." So the same year of our escape, Deacon had a secret project he called Wanderer and some kind of theory, though Desdemona doesn't elaborate. Presumably, these have to be related to us. A core component in Deacon's search seems to be the hunt for the location of the Institute. Before we complete their questline during the events of Fallout 4, the Railroad spends a great deal of time trying to answer this question. Of course, we know they're located beneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, but the Railroad isn't sure of that. They think the Institute and CIT might be connected, but they've sent agents to the old CIT compound, but found no secret bunkers or doors or anything like that. What they don't know is that the Institute uses teleportation devices to access the above-ground world, not secret doors or anything. There is no door to the Institute like they suspected. Anyway, Deacon's secret project name was Wanderer. What could that have meant? We know the player character from Fallout 3 was referred to as the Lone Wanderer by both the narrative and many characters. And we know Deacon's been to the Capital Wasteland before. In fact, he's probably been there very recently. He tells us he went there quote-unquote a few years ago, and specifically mentions that he's been there when the water was clean, meaning that he visited after the events of the main storyline were completed and we finished Project Purity.
I ever tell you about the time I was in Capital Wasteland? Now there's a tale. I miss Capital Wasteland. You can actually drink the water there. Capital Wasteland. Exports, purified water, some decent tech. Oh, and an insane suicidal cult that worships radiation. Thanks, guys.
Perhaps he heard tales of the Lone Wanderer from the Capital Wasteland, and that's where he got the inspiration for the name. Heck, maybe there was some connection. Here is what I think happened. I think when Deacon started investigating past sightings of Institute staff members, he stumbled upon evidence of Kellogg and the Institute's raid on Vault 111 50 years ago. He realized this was a very, very significant location, but didn't quite understand why. Heck, given that he wasn't even sure where the Institute was, maybe Deacon suspected Vault 111 was the Institute's base after all. It was closed, so he couldn't go inside it. Anyway, I digress. Coincidentally, at some point in time while he was watching over it, it opened up, and we, the player, came out. He obviously wanted to investigate us further, and began pursuing the player. Seeing as he's been to the Capital Wasteland before, and had definitely heard tales of a previous Vault Dweller known as the Lone Wanderer, he gave us the codename Wanderer, and hypothesized that maybe we could know something about the Institute after all. Desdemona wrote her terminal entry sometime after he started trailing us. Remember, this terminal entry was dated sometime in the year 2287, but unlike so many other terminal entries, we don't know the exact month. I think she wrote it after the game itself really began. Sure enough, at the end of the day, Deacon's hypothesis would prove kind of correct after all, and we the player may or may not help the Railroad defeat the Institute and become the saviors of the Commonwealth. He was right. Given that we can now be relatively confident that Deacon's not a synth or a former Vault Dweller himself or anything like that, this seems to be the most likely possibility. This would explain Deacon's interest in the player, yet his lack of knowledge about Sean, and it would also explain why Deacon didn't just immediately approach us the second we left. Initially, he wasn't sure whether or not we were an Institute asset. He didn't know for sure who we are, only that we might have been important. And thus, that is the tale of Project Wanderer. Deacon, as it turns out, is a very complex man indeed. He suffered the loss of his one true love, and horrible betrayal by his best friends. He's also seen so many of his fellow Railroad agents die due to Institute raids. This is why he lies so much and is such a secretive man. He's figured out that the more information he reveals, the more vulnerable he makes himself. So he doesn't reveal much real information. Instead, he hides things, makes up stories, and becomes deceptive. But he is still a truly good man, with pure motivations, and a very, very noble cause. Anyway, it's been around an hour, so this is where we are going to wrap up. Thanks so much for stopping by, everybody. What do you think was going on here? Do you agree with our hypothesis, our story of Deacon and Johnny D? Or do you think there's more at play? Do you have your own theory? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.